Second chances. Chapter 5. Punishment comes. Notes. The day of Becker's punishment is at hand. How will they handle this next step together? Deep in the underground layers of the kingdom, the high priest sat, waiting for his secretary to report to him. He had been absolutely furious when Becker had brought that human back, and even more so when her Lord Father had healed him. How dare she break the rules and traditions for one lowly human? Surely she would see what folly this was. But no, according to the men he employed, he learned that Becker and that human spent almost all their time together. She acting as guide, and even trying to befriend the human who now walked so freely within their world. How dare she? When he, the high priest, had had his eye on her from the day she came of age. He had offered her the usual traditional gifts one seeking a mate would offer, and even a few non-traditional ones, and each time, she had rebuked him. Turned him away. Him. It just wasn't done. He was the high priest. One of the many ranking members in their world. He was second only to her Lord Father. How could she turn him down? His thoughts were interrupted when a door opened and his secretary stepped in and bowed.
My lord, forgive my tardiness. I was detained. But I come bearing news.
Approach.
The lesser man did so, and kissed the high priest's hand before kneeling.
It is as they fear, my lord. Becker. And the human.
The poor man stuttered out, watching with growing fear as anger slowly replaced the complacent smile upon the high priest's face as he looked down at him.
What about them?
He asked, his voice cold.
They came in late the other night. Late, as in after the sun had set. He walked her back to her rooms and kissed her hand. They are growing ever closer, my lord.
The high priest stood suddenly, and rage filled his expression.
Does she think she can supplant me with a mere human?
He raged.
I will make that wave of a bitch pay, forever turning me down, and her human, along with her.
But how, my lord?
The man asked, groveling by this point.
Her Lord Father has yet to set a punishment for this betrayal. Perhaps you can
take it over myself.
The high priest smiled and nodded as he thought about this course of action.
Yes, that would work. She must be punished for breaking the law, as is tradition.
He turned to the man before him and waved a hand, dismissing him.
Make it happen. I want to be the one who makes the Lord's daughter pay, and pay she will, forever dismissing me.
Yes, Lord. Right away.
The man scrambled to carry out his orders. To alert the lord of the land that the time had come. Becker's punishment had been postponed long enough. Deep in that darkness, the high priest smiled, and then laughed. His voice echoing throughout the cavern. Oh yes, he would have his revenge. Days passed, and Becker and William found themselves growing closer to each other. Becker found herself sharing parts of her life as well as information about her home that she had never told anyone. William was easy to talk to, and while he still struggled to find his voice, they had an easy understanding between them. Almost like they could read each other. Sense the other's emotions or desires. An odd thing for a Valkyra. They only associated and mated with their own kind, and yet, Becker found William to be good company, and was curious about his world as he was about hers. But it wasn't always easy between them. In fact, they had had their first major argument just the day before. William had a terrible temper, but so did Becker, and when they were put together like that, it was an explosion waiting to happen. It had been almost 2 months that William had awoken to find himself in a strange place, and though he had been deemed fit to come and go as he pleases, his voice had yet to return. That angered him, for he was usually very eloquent, and now was reduced to her gentle intrusion into his mind to be able to be understood. Becker wasn't overly forceful in her way of understanding him. He could feel or sense her in his mind, but it was like having someone constantly with him, at all times. At first, it had been slightly annoying. To know she could hear whatever he thought of the instant he thought it. But with practice, he learned to control which thoughts he allowed her to hear, and which he didn't. Not that he kept secrets, well he did, but he appreciated that she didn't go prying and kept her word. But over time, he became accustomed to it, having her in his head. A comfort even, for they had both learned, through trial and error, to hear each other back and forth. So, if they were lying in their prospective beds, late at night, he could talk to her and have her respond, and he would hear it whispered softly in his mind. That, in a strange way, was comforting to him, knowing she was always there. It even helped curb his temper at times, having her with him all the time. For he lost control when angered, and winced when he realized she had heard him spout profanity with such ease. And not just his voice was something that often angered him. The fact that his world was lost to him had not really hit him till about his second week out of bed, when he was telling Becker all about his world and what things had been like for him. Not all of it was good, but the good parts he did miss, and grew frustrated more than angry about not being able to see those he had considered friends ever again, nor to retrieve something he had cherished. Each time he lashed out, he did apologize profusely, and Becker, always the lady, would accept his apology, telling him not to worry. She was very understanding, and he liked that about her. But she had her issues too. Becker also had a temper, but her issue was more not so much her anger as her withholding things from William. She didn't outright lie, as she really didn't know how to, but it frustrated them both when he brought up that subject, time and again, about what would happen to her since she had saved him. She had been wondering that herself for many weeks now, and the agony of waiting is what made her often snarlish or snappish, for which she too readily apologized. They were so alike while still being so different. And the people of her world had begun to notice the slow building attraction between the haughty, arrogant but gentle human to one of their own. Whispers fled, and soon, the council would call for her to face her actions, but till they did, Becker was determined that William would learn all he could about the place he now found himself. For it was his world now too. And this fact, that she had been hiding said information from him, is what set off their argument.
I don't understand, Rebecca.
Tavington had said, knowing she heard him in her mind.
Why won't you tell me what is going on? I demand to know.
Because it isn't your problem, William, Becker said, exasperated at him, as he yet again demanded to know what was in store for her. He knew, as a colonel, that to disobey meant punishment, and he would be damned if he let anyone hurt his angel. But she didn't seem to see it that way, and it frustrated him to no end.
Damn it, Rebecca. Then you shouldn't have done it. You shouldn't have saved me if you can't even tell me how they will punish you for it.
He ran his fingers through his long hair, eyes flashing in anger as he rounded on her.
Do you think I would let them? You are mine. My angel.
Becker had never seen this type of affection from the man she knew to be cold and aloof. Though William had remained polite and courteous, sawing his occasional outburst of temper, he had never shown or given any hint to how he felt towards Becker, outwardly. This took her by complete surprise. "William, I asked you to trust me, and you said that you did," she said softer. "Why can you not trust me now?" She reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, which happened to be a mistake, as Tavington whirled on her, grabbing her wrist in one hand, wrapping his other hand around her neck and backing her into the nearest tree. His grip was tight, but not too tight that she couldn't breathe, as she looked up at him with eyes wide and full of shock.
Because you are mine, Rebecca.
His voice soft, but his eyes snapped rage and fire.
You infuriate me by not obeying me, by hiding this secret from me, and it makes me despise you for lying to me. You, the one person I am slowly beginning.
He trailed off as he looked into her eyes, and his hand around her neck softened as he let that hand travel her face.
I have never wanted anything to do with feelings, and yet you make me feel them. I hate you for that. Yet you are the only one here that I can rely on. Trust, and I hate that too.
His words took on a growl as he moved himself closer to her and pressed his body firmly against her, letting her feel his desire for her, to which he, himself, hated. He craved her, in a way that he had never craved anyone. Him. The butcher. The cold, calculating colonel of His Majesty's Green Dragoons. Falling in love. Unheard of. He hated the very idea of it all. Hated her for making him feel this way, and yet, staring into her eyes, he found he did not hate her. Wanted to protect her, and that she would not let him, enraged him.
I love you.
His voice whispered softly in her mind, which made Becker tremble against him.
You disgust me. I disgust myself. I will never forgive you for what you have done. Never.
His words ended abruptly as he suddenly crashed his lips to hers, pulling her flush against him as he kissed her. His arms wrapping around her small frame and holding her close as his lips moved with hers. Hungry, passionate. He groaned into the kiss before he pulled away with a hiss. For Becker had slapped him. "Don't you ever do that again, William Tavington," Becker panted out as she regained her head, for she had lost it the second William had kissed her. She had been surprised but had responded in kind. Wrapping her own arms around his frame and kissing him eagerly back till sanity returned. "I didn't give you leave to kiss me. If I disgust you so much, then maybe you should find someone else to spend time with." She huffed and made like she was going to walk away. But a steel grip to her wrist stopped her, as William caught her and spun her around to face him again.
Rebecca, I'm sorry.
His voice sounded lost, confused as his eyes bored into hers.
Forgive me. I am quite not myself today, it seems.
Was he really apologizing? That was a first, ever. But he found that he meant it. Every single word.
I do trust you. I do. It's just that I know you are hiding something from me, and it irritates me that you won't tell me what.
I asked you to trust me, and that I would tell you only what you needed to know, and you agreed. I can't tell you what I don't know, William. Even I am not sure when said punishment will be meted out, or how. She looked up at him and tilted her head lightly. Can we, please, just put that behind us? For now. The day is too beautiful to be fighting with each other, and there is something that I wanted to show you. She watched him, before seeing his nod and his features take on a look of resignation. He would not push the matter further. Good. Now come on. She boldly slipped her hand into his, entwining their fingers, and led the way deeper into the woods. They walked a few miles, the path getting steeper and steeper.
Rebecca, where are we going?
William's voice rang out in her mind as she smiled back at him.
We have come this way before, have we not? What is going on?
He sensed in her some excitement, and he wasn't really sure what to expect. She was leading up the mountain pass to a small secluded meadow that they had found together while out on one of their walks. They had decided to claim it for themselves. A place where they could go to be alone, talk, get to know each other better. A place just for them. Walking into the bright sunlight, she dropped his hand and waited till he joined her. Turning to face him, she seemed nervous and excited all the same time. You asked me once what a Alik'r was. Well, I have decided to show you. She walked over to him and came to a stop before him. Her deep emerald eyes locked onto his sea green orbs. I asked you to trust me. I want to be honest with you and show you what I am, but remember, it is still me. Taking a few steps back, she closed her eyes and felt her magic flare up inside her. It was almost instantaneous. One moment a woman, the next an overly large wolf stood before William. Ears perked forward as she slowly lowered herself to a sitting position in front of him. This is me, William. This is what I can do. What most of my people can do. Only my form is larger than most of my people because I am the guardian of the valley. She watched as William paled and took a few steps back before seeing his back go ramrod straight. She tried not to snort a giggle at seeing how he tried not to show how afraid he was. She didn't blame him. Seeing someone turn into an animal would have freaked her out too if she wasn't so used to it. He took 2 steps forward and slowly raised his hand towards her, before pausing as if unsure. She gave a soft type of a chuff and nodded her great head, and his hand came in contact with her fur. He started but lowered his hand the rest of the way till he was all but petting her. He hadn't run, for which she was thankful. She wasn't sure she could have resisted the urge to chase if he had done so.
This is, well, different.
His voice betrayed him as it broke slightly, but she only purred. encouraging him. If he was to stay, he had to get used to this.
You are beautiful, in either form.
She felt him stiffen and felt the locks in her mind go up as he shoved her out for a moment. Something he did when he didn't want her to hear him, and she tilted her head slightly to try and catch his eye. But he refused to look at her. Had he just called her beautiful? She was startled as well by his outburst of emotion, but tried not to let it show. Standing, she stepped back and changed back to her human form, giving him a soft smile once she was herself again. She decided not to respond to his beautiful comment and tried to keep things from getting awkward between them. Reaching out, she boldly slipped her hand into his, something that he actually allowed and even frequently instigated himself.
So, you changed to wolf? Is it something you like to do? You said you were the guardian of the valley. What exactly does that mean?
My people call me the Great Wolf, William. I help protect the area around the castle and our land with other wolves when I am not out reaping souls. She chuckled softly. He seemed very interested in this gift of hers, and they spent the remainder of the day discussing it. She told him all she knew about herself, her gifts, and he responded in kind. Only as the sun had crossed the sky and dusk had come, did they stand and turn to walk back to the castle together. William unlocking his mind to her as they went. It was as they were cresting the last hill that they saw the small group of people just outside the castle, waiting for them. Becca stiffened considerably beside William, and he looked over at her with obvious concern. Seeing the look he gave her, she only shook her head and gave his hand a light squeeze before she dropped it. So, the time had come then. As they reached the group, everyone went silent and stared. It was a group made up of the higher council members, her father, and the Lord High Priest. Not a very good sign. For the Lord High Priest only ever came out to do his duties for important festivals and the like. That he was here now suggested that her time had not only come, but that she would not, in any way, enjoy it.
Daughter, it is time.
Becca nodded at her father's words and looked over at William, who seemed thoroughly confused.
Rebecca?
His voice questioning her as well as his eyes. He seemed frightened in a way, and she felt badly. I have to go, William, she replied softly, meeting his eyes and trying to minimize the way he looked at her. So concerned.
Go where?
His eyes flit to her father and the group before back to her.
You are in trouble. What will they do?
He glared at the small group assembled and felt something within him flare up. Like a great fire, as his feelings for her and his chivalrous nature kicked in together, making him grab her arm and push her behind him. As if he could protect her from what was to come. Casting a glance back over his shoulder at her, his eyes furrowed and full of fire.
No. I will not allow them to hurt you. Whatever you have done, it can't be this bad.
He cast a look so full of hate and malice back towards the group that waited, and with force, he shouted into each of their minds. Loud enough for them to react.
You will not hurt her.
Hearing his shout, 3 of the men pulled daggers in order to protect their lord. Another 2 grabbed hold of William's arms and all but wrestled him to the ground upon his knees. No easy feat considering he was 6'2" and a very strongly built man to begin with. It took almost 3 men to hold him, to subdue him. No. Stop. Don't hurt him. He heard Becca call out, which made him fight all the more as he watched as they moved to circle her as if to herd her away. Please. Stop.
This is not your place to say, human.
One of the men gathered through at him.
She knew the laws and broke them anyway. She must pay for what she has done, and has already accepted the consequences.
No. Take me instead then. It was I who saw her first.
You! What is your life compared to one of ours? You are but a fleeting blink of an eye in our vast lifetime. She made the error, she will be the one to pay it.
The Lord High Priest voice rang out over the din. A sneering cold voice that made Becca shiver in slight fear. At his words, 2 men grabbed Becca and began to escort her away, which made William fight again to get free.
No. You can't take her.
His voice ringing in her mind was so full of longing, fear, rage, hate, love, despair all mixed into one that it tore at Becca's heart. Never had she heard a sound like that. She paused and looked at the men before her, and one by one, they nodded at her and let her pass. She swiftly went back to William and shoved the men restraining him gently away from him before turning to take his hands into her own.
William, I asked you to trust me,
she said again, reminding him of his promise.
Do you trust me?
She asked, earnestly. He gasped for air as it suddenly felt like that he couldn't breathe. He was panicking again, but this time, he didn't care. Something was going to happen to his angel. By the looks of it, none of it good, and he felt helpless to help her as she had him. He didn't understand any of this at all. Why he cared. Why he felt so frightened for her. All he knew was that he wanted to protect her from whatever was coming, and that he couldn't, made him panic all over again. But the soft touch of her hands against his, and then a tender caress to his cheek pulled him out of his panic as their eyes met. He saw resolve in her eyes. Resolve and promise. He nodded at her question.
Then trust me now. Please,
she whispered softly, moving to lightly lay her forehead against his, peering deep into his eyes. He was surprised by her actions but welcomed them nonetheless, moving so that his nose brushed hers gently as he reached up to cup the back of her neck, pulling her closer to him.
I can't help you. What will happen to you?
Such lonesome despair sounded in his voice. Not at all like the man that she had come to know and admire.
Do not worry. This is my path. I need you to trust me. Go back to your rooms. Wait. All will be well.
This she said out loud, but shutting her mind to all but him, she softly whispered to him.
I will come back, William. I promise. This is but a stone in the pond of eternity we have to spend together now. Trust me. I will come back.
He heard this and acknowledged it with but a subtle nod of his head. His eyes dimming some as the fight left him. Slowly, he released her, letting her go face whatever fate she had to. He didn't like it one bit, but she had asked him to trust her and he would do so. Had she not saved him? Gave him new life? Surely she must know what she was doing. He stood and watched as she was escorted away. Her father stopped and turned to him to give him a look that was both sad and empathetic at the same time. Watching her walk away from him and feeling his heart in his throat, William held out a hand, taking a step forward and opened his mouth, her name falling effortless from his lips as if he had never lost his voice at all.
Rebecca.
She paused only a moment, hearing him speak for the first time, and looked back at him. Her lips turned up into a soft smile, but it was sad as she blinked to keep her tears from falling. It had taken an emotional outburst for him to find his voice. She hoped it would not be the last time she heard it. With what she had to face, one never knew. But she had promised, and she never broke her word. They both knew it.
William.
With that single phrase of his name, she was whisked away into the deeper recesses of the castle, and William was left alone, and so utterly empty, as he no longer felt her within his mind. That alone scared him more than anything else. Her absence. Slowly, he headed back up to his rooms and sat in a chair near the fire to wait. He would wait. She had promised,